Have you ever just looked at a massive, really complicated problem and wondered, why on earth doesn't this get fixed? Well, today we're going to unpack the source material on one of those exact problems. We're going to peel it back layer by layer, kind of like an onion, to really understand the hidden architecture of a crisis that feels, for all the world, like it's designed never to be solved.
So let's just dive right in with the big question our sources keep coming back to. We're all told there's a system, one that's in place to help, to protect, and to serve. But when you actually need it, why does that system so often feel like it's totally malfunctioning? Or even worse, like it was never really designed for you in the first place?
All right, let's start where it all begins for most people. That moment the system first makes contact with your life. It's that moment you reach out for help and you're just met with silence.
Our sources have a name for this. They call it the glitch in the matrix moment. You call 911, your heart is absolutely pounding, and you hear those words, "Help is on the way." 5 minutes go by, then 10, then 45. And somewhere in that awful gap, this terrifying realization starts to sink in. The system, it isn't what you thought it was. And that one single glitch, it's a window into a much deeper, much more troubling reality.
Now here's where things get really interesting, and to be honest, pretty shocking. It's the legal foundation for all this. The source material points to multiple U.S. Supreme Court rulings that have all confirmed the same thing. Police do not have a constitutional duty to protect you as an individual. Their job is to find as general deterrence, basically to keep a broad sense of order, not to be your personal bodyguard. So in a lot of cases, they're more like historians of misfortune, showing up after the fact just to take a report. And that 45-minute wait we talked about, well, the sources are projecting that by 2026, it's going to be driven by a total perfect storm. You've got departments facing massive staffing shortages because everyone's burning out. They're getting completely overwhelmed by social calls, things like mental health crises that, let's be real, they aren't trained for. And on top of all that, while the world has iPhones and AI, a lot of dispatch systems are still running on tech from the early 2000s. That glitch isn't just a bug, it's a whole system buckling under the strain.
But that strain is really just the surface layer. If we peel that back, we find the machine itself, the local nuts and bolts that have been rusting in place for decades.
This right here is the core concept our source material keeps coming back to, generational institutionalization. And it's a really powerful idea. It basically says that after a certain point, corruption isn't an accident anymore. It's not a few bad apples. It becomes the actual code that the system runs on. It's not broken. It's working exactly as it's been taught to for decades.
So how does an operating system like that actually run? The sources describe this 50-year cycle. Law enforcement becomes like a family business, right? Badges get passed down from one generation to the next. What you or I might see as collusion with criminals across the border gets normalized and even taught to rookies as border diplomacy. And get this, recruits who show too much integrity get labeled not a team player and are basically pushed out. Over decades, this creates this tangled web of favors between police, lawyers, politicians, where everybody owes somebody something.
So what does this all mean in the real world? Well, the numbers tell the story. Data from a city like El Paso between 2018 and 2023 is just stark. Almost 700 use of force complaints were filed by citizens. Out of those, you want to guess how many were actually sustained? 35, a 5% success rate. When accountability is that lopsided, the message it sends to people inside the system is pretty clear. The rules don't really apply to you.
And why can't we just go in and fix it? Because this whole machine is protected by a legal fortress. You've got powerful police union contracts with rules that can delay interrogations after an incident, or even wipe disciplinary records clean after just a few years. Then you have state laws, like Texas Local Government Code 143, that dictate exactly how police are disciplined, which often ties the hands of local officials who actually want to create stronger oversight. The machine is really, really good at protecting itself.
Okay, so we've looked at the internal machine, but what's powering it from the outside? Now we're going to peel back the next layer and see the massive external forces that don't just influence the system, they often dictate its reality completely.
You've probably heard this phrase before, but isn't just a cool line from a TV show. The sources are very clear. This is a functional, real-world business model. Silver or lead. It's a simple, brutal choice that's offered to officials. You can take this bribe, which is probably more than your yearly salary, or you can face a lethal threat, not just to you, but to your entire family. And that creates this powerful, silent majority of people who are just too afraid to ever speak up. And this is exactly why it's a shadow government. In a lot of regions, these cartels have totally evolved. They're not just hiding in the shadows anymore. They collect their own taxes from businesses, called quotas. They run their own courts to settle disputes, often way faster and more decisively than the actual government. They effectively become the state, providing infrastructure and security, and completely blurring the line between a criminal enterprise and a sovereign power.
And this is the part we absolutely have to get our heads around. Our mental image of these groups is completely outdated. We are not talking about street gangs anymore. We are talking about multinational, billion-dollar corporations that operate with a terrifying, mind-boggling level of logistical and financial sophistication.
I mean, if you want to understand just how sophisticated they are, just look at who they're hiring. They are actively headhunting top-tier talent. We're talking PhD chemists to get synthetic drug purity just right. We're talking high-level forensic accountants to move billions of dollars through global financial systems without a trace. And they're hiring former military signal engineers to build and maintain their own private encrypted communication networks. This is corporate-level recruitment, plain and simple.
So, this brings us to the biggest, most complicated layer of them all, right? If these organizations are so powerful and so dangerous, why can't the most powerful military on the planet just go in and put a stop to it? Well, the answer is incredibly complex.
You see, the game is chinking unbelievably fast. In late 2025, the US government officially calls illicit fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, a WMD. That completely changes the game from a drug war to a counter-proliferation mission and allows for more direct military action. But here's the kicker. By early 2026, the cartels are already responding with their own high-tech warfare, using AI-powered drone swarms. This is not a street fight anymore. This is asymmetric warfare.
And this right here is the trap. Some analysts call it a Westphalian trap, where the modern rules of national sovereignty basically prevent you from taking direct action against a threat that's operating inside an allied nation's borders. So on one hand, you've got these organizations trafficking what's now considered a WMD, but on the other hand, they're doing it from inside the borders of a major trading partner. A full-scale invasion? That's an act of war against an ally, and it could literally shatter the global economy. The US is basically caught in a geopolitical checkmate.
You see, the core problem is that our entire understanding of this conflict is dangerously out of date. We're still thinking about criminal gangs when the reality is WMD traffickers. We're thinking the strategy should be arrests, but the reality on the ground is drone interdiction. We see the border as just a line to cross, but it's become a gray zone of electronic and kinetic warfare. And their profit doesn't come from plants in the ground anymore. It comes from precursor chemicals shipped from halfway across the world.
So, if the old way of fighting this war is unwinnable, then what's next? And this is where the source material really pivots, arguing that the entire objective, the whole goal, needs to change. It's about moving away from a strategy of fighting to a strategy of building.
And this strategic shift it's profound. The old fight was all about mass arrests, a reactive border war. But the new game, as laid out by the sources, is about systematically undermining the very conditions that let these shadow governments exist in the first place. It's about reducing demand, creating economic opportunity, and using really precise accountability.
And here's what that actually looks like in practice. It means treating addiction as a public health crisis to shrink the market. It means creating real jobs and vocational training for young people to actually outcompete cartel recruitment. It means using data to focus all your law enforcement resources on the tiny fraction of offenders who are driving most of the violence. And, this one's huge, creating radical financial transparency to make it nearly impossible to wash billions in dirty money through things like real estate.
Ultimately, the goal itself completely shifts. It's no longer about trying to win a war against an enemy. It's about building a society that is fundamentally resilient to corruption and to violence. It's about making the community so strong that the shadow government simply has no ground to take root.
And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question that the source material poses. And it reframes everything we've just talked about. Are we pouring trillions of dollars into fighting a war that, by its very nature, might just be unwinnable? Or should the real focus be on building a community so healthy, so prosperous, and so just that a war becomes totally obsolete? Now that's something to think about.